Hey there, guys. Welcome to the school tomorrow. I've been doing real time training using Jupyter notebooks. This is a class that you wouldn't get just by looking at this content, is being shared with like high school and under, right? But these are very advanced and for their age, I mean, this is a new generation that has jumped on ahead, and this stuff isn't that hard. It just, you need exposure and time, just like piano lessons or any kind of language. So, and they've had Python a little bit before this. On Sunday, I spent a lot of time talking up the circuit boards you can now get and run with Python. You can also use other very clever APIs and GUI IDEs to program these devices. So, like data classes, decorators, how decorators work, and therefore what properties, how they work. And to understand that, you need a combination of how properties work, right? You have to explain that. I'm going to go on from Python here in a minute if you're like spacing out, like, why am I listening to this? Python is the top language as of right now. Okay, it's not going to stay there. It's always going to be on my radar. Anyway, the iterator pattern, we can skip that. You really need the descriptor pattern to understand how property works. So you need both the decorator concept, which you need to go over a few times. Like we've talked about on this channel quite a bit. For those new to this channel, it's partly Python. So just a warning. This is called the magic circle. I know Ray Hettinger has one where if you change the radius, then automatically the area and the circumference, which is also the perimeter, we call it the circumference. The perimeter of a circle is its circumference. And in this circle instance, you can just say, oh, I want the area to be 50, so I just hit 50 into the area, and it recomputes internally what therefore the radius must be and what the circumference must be. It figures those out as you assign to either of any of those three, right? You can pick a radius or pick an area or pick a perimeter, and the other two will automatically change. And how does that work, right? Well, property very cleverly wraps methods into a different kind of object called a property object through decorating. And the descriptor pattern explains then the magic that it gains in so wrapping the ordinary looking methods underneath. So I teach about the get and set using a secretary pattern, talk about a busy office worker. Several say doctors or lawyers or, any kind of like specialist want a generic sort of receptionist, secretary person anchoring things. And that's a very important job. And I'm clear in my presentation of this that I'm not setting up a class hierarchy necessarily. Like the receptionist might be the main job, and the specialists, they have their own specialty. So in this case, they share a secretary, and if you call this office and leave a message for so and so, you call so and so's number direct, but you get the secretary on the line because the practitioner has to be doing whatever, right? They can't be sitting around answering the phone. You understand the pattern. So once you anchor a really clear story, then it's much easier to eyeball the source code and sort of get what's going on. Anyway, this is what we were up to as of last week. It was just kind of an initial brush with that material. Okay, now explaining gone ahead, you'll see when we get to Facebook at the end how I use a Bob Dobbs avatar myself, which is kind of paying homage to what some consider too sarcastic and threatening in a not funny way, right? They're not impressed with Subgenius Church of because it's edgy in a way they don't appreciate. So I understand that. It can be offensive. And there's teachings about that in the church. We understand all that. So, this has been a key topic in correspondence lately. Okay, Dick has convinced me. This we can call a Goldberg. And the frequency won't matter. It can be high frequency, low frequency. I love this video. I'm going to turn off the sound. Well, I'll give you a sample. Cool, right? Cool music. I think I've shared this before. After having done all these ACLS exercises, the hex grid now is really much more in the forefront of my thinking. I'm trying to change to a different Jupyter notebook here. Hello, there we go. So what I'm referring to are some puzzles that people have been into in order to tackle upcoming puzzles, championships, what do you call it, contests, right? Part of the course that I'm teaching here to the high and middle schoolers is prep for a tournament of a sort, right? Okay, so back to the Hexapent is what I've called it, and I've called it Hexapents for everyone. That's been my campaign now for years. But I'm okay with Goldberg as a synonym for this type of thing. And it's specifically what I mean by a Goldberg or a hexapent is that all the facets, it's like a ball, it's like a soccer ball, and you always have 12 pentagons, but the number of hexagons is under your control. You have like a little spinner dial, and you can increase or decrease the number of hexagons. And you get like a smoother and smoother sphere the more hexagons you flood in there. And there's an algorithm and so on. So we talk about that in this course called Martian Math. Now that's my old personal workspace. By old, I mean it was in a house, a different house. Same neighborhood actually. It's a double doorgy down there. Let's see, if I click on this, does it get any bigger? Does it take me somewhere if I click on it? Doesn't seem, oh yes it does. Takes me to Flickr. We're going to see some old technology, folks, from the 90s. I can zoom in now a little bit. This fish thing called Elfish, I think this was Elfish, and it was marketed as Russians no longer making weapons, but still needing something interesting to do. In other words, Russians are fun now, and they're giving us this cool aquarium, the coolest ever, like it was the best in the genre. And this tower case, which has a Python sticker on it, impresses me because that's a pretty up-to-date looking Python logo, and it didn't always have that. So we do have that, even though this would be pre-95, this picture. And of course, a Fuller projection or Dymaxion map. And these two are certificates on the wall of appreciation for all my work for the American Friends Service Committee. That's a Quaker social action arm, we call it. The Quaker, what do we call it? Not the Quaker Mafia, the Quaker KGB, I don't know. It's in Central, there's, we call it the Quaker Vatican in Philadelphia, where we have a Friend Center that has some headquarters, right? Because Philadelphia is a very important city in the Quaker lore. Okay. You can read more about that. I digress, but that's all I do. I digress and I keep coming back around to the same points. So if you watch this channel, you now have a sense of the topics I cover, including music. At this point, I've been in South Africa quite a bit in my time, more than average, right? Except for South Africans who would be there their whole lives, right? But not me. But my parents lived in Lesotho. Excuse me. Whoa, okay. Got to turn off the music, and we'll just pause the action. I like reaction videos, and I think it's important with this one of Antwoord called Babies on Fire to see it as a parody of what we would call, in our country, in the U.S., this culture of what we would call white trash, I guess. And that's a sensitive thing to say. It's kind of like Real Player One comes to mind, living in trailers. This and what's being parodied in Babies on Fire, it helps to make that link. In other words, there's socioeconomic class stuff being satirically treated. And if you miss that whole level, then it's not as um, engaging, right? So it's an anthropological thing. And that goes to city planning. And so in my Facebook, there's the Bob Dobbs I told you about, right? Oh, did I finish showing that? Right, remember this one? That's George Fox, the founder of Quakers, one of them, right? So going on down, Religious Society Friends is the technical name. Quakers is they took it on. There's a story behind that word. Okay, it's a little different than Shakers, but close enough to be funny, right? Quakers and Shakers. So I'm happy with it. Shakers died out though, so got to be careful. You don't follow that route. There's David Bowie. Okay, and what I've been sharing with Quakers most recently is the Lug Cat meme, because understanding memes very important in memetics, and we're all about memetics and mnemonics around here, in kind of bring it back around kind of way, right? It's a sphere in a way. And again, shout out and thanks to Mike Achera for Thinking with Mike episode 5. That was really good. And the consistently good quality conversations on this channel. I recommend it. Thinking with Mike. He makes Lux blocks, which I have just all over the place actually, just lying out in my yard. And like, I kind of have a way that I curate stuff like a museum guy. But of course, I want everything to be accessible, so I don't have it nicely organized in drawers. I just have it everywhere. So like I have a Hexapent. Now this comes apart. I could fragment this because it's all magnets pulling in. Clever with a ball bearing at the middle, and each ball, like you could think of this as shrinking down to becoming each one of these little balls inside this tetrahedron, and how they fill it up. Think there's number sequences involved there, and that's part of the curriculum that I bring is number sequence based, but also what are those number sequences about? They're about easy to visualize and animate themes, because we're also maybe learning animation, aren't we? In other words, we need these topics. They're perennial topics. It's not like I'm looking for big breakthroughs necessarily, right? It's not like it's heritage, and there's a lot of it, and it's very interesting. So we do that on this channel, geometry. All right. Hope that was interesting. Talk to you soon.